Thank you, Elaine. And thank you for hosting this conversation. I am honestly so excited to be able to share today what for me is a brand new opportunity and conversation to bring together two things that I get to work on and love both of: narrative strategy and creative approaches to community work. So we'll start with, why do local organizations, all kinds of groups that are doing advocacy, organizing, education, uh, and engagement, information development, why do they find that working with artists and creative approaches is a good strategy? There are actually a lot of reasons, and I'm only going to really focus today on the way that artists change the way that narrative appears in public through this work. But our materials that we'll be sharing afterward go into a lot more detail about other benefits that many of you probably are already aware of, which include, just the way that people come together, engaging new people, creating kind of an easy on-ramp for lots of people to find out about community and policy goals of organizations. And now we'll talk about how that happens. And we'll focus primarily on experiences, and note that people, again, that they come together in new ways through these experiences and through their participation, but it really changes the way that a narrative can be shared. Artists can do these kinds of things just as examples, and we'll be talking about each of these: bike ride, party, painting the street, acting out the future, making meetings fun. And we'll start with these opportunities that take place on our streets, which the narrative that the groups who organize these events are often trying to share are things about the streets and how the public interacts with streets, that streets are city's largest public spaces, that the people, we own the streets, people on bikes belong on streets, pedestrian bike safety is a priority, and can also kind of show important connections between community assets through these things that take place on public streets. Starting with a bike ride, you can organize a bike ride pretty easily, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, because people actually love to do a bike ride, and especially if you let them know that it's going to be an easy ride, there's going to be nobody left behind, everybody will be kept together by a slow, flat ride, and that all ages and bike riders are welcome. And as in this case, we paid artists to create art bikes, and you see one right here. This is a bicycle shaped like a pig. Here's what it looks like. You can see that in this event, we started it with what we call a decorating party, and we provided bright lights, battery-powered lights for everyone to use if they didn't come with their bike already decorated. Those moments before a bike ride starts can be a great opportunity to share narrative about anything. It doesn't even have to be something that's sort of transportation or bicycle related. It's just an opportunity when people are gathering to have a good chat conversation about sort of any topic. So it can be a place to gather information, but also to share narratives. We also had an artist created design that we put on stickers and t-shirts and posters. Having a street party is, again, I mean, it's a little more complicated because while you don't usually need a permit for a bike ride, you shouldn't need a permit. If you're closing the street, you do. But closing the street creates, a real whole different experience for people to be in the street, in this public place. We invite artists, in this case here, 2 different dance groups who came together to both have fun dancing, but also show people their skills. This is what it can look like when you close a street and let people play. And there are some great resources. Again, we'll be sharing this with you later. The interesting thing about both of these events is they involve the city. And that's another good opportunity to interact with a local government, to share your narrative, to have your narrative understood by local officials. In the case of the bike ride, we actually invited city council members who led the ride, who really understood the narrative we were trying to communicate, and they have big megaphones, so it's great to have them sharing that. When we do street painting, asphalt art, or in the case of PaintnSkate, the roller rink that we painted, we always ask people for their input, and we're thinking about the narrative that we're trying to share when we ask them. So we invite them and give them the tools of art, just paper and colored pencils or crayons, give them some prompts, and then we give that stack of artwork or responses to the artist. And in this case, one of our speakers, Pam Kravitz, took a stack of suggestions and created colorful crosswalks, which then the people painted when we had a closed street that they could paint the crosswalks on. In this case, the community was really interested in traffic slowing. And so we were really focused on getting people to talk about the things that they loved and like to see in their community. So, slow down and take a look at what you're seeing. And here's an example of another event and what it can look like and how you can share the narrative in your video. In that case, again, this city was a major partner. In fact, they were a joint applicant for the funding in that project. And for them, it was important. The narrative was actually critical. It was both sharing how streets can be safer when you have asphalt art and connecting 2 really important community assets with a new path that they wanted people to follow along this particular street.
Margy, there's a couple of questions in the chat that maybe can be answered quickly. One was about what was the objective of the ride that you featured, and similar to that is a follow-up question that may be longer and maybe you could wait till later about how were people able to sort of assess whether that objective was met?
So the objective of the ride, I can't remember if we actually saw the slide, that there's a series of objectives for all of these kind of street related events that typically have to do with making sure that people know that streets are not just for cars, but they're also for people, for bike riders, that it's important for bikes and pedestrians to have safe places to walk. And again, oftentimes, connecting, showing people a new pathway. Those are all things that can happen in a bike ride. But as I mentioned, a bike ride can just be a way to gather people to share any kind of narrative. And that's something you can do by hosting a bike decorating party or some kind of pre-event before the bike ride starts, or even an event after the bike ride. I'm going to keep going if that's okay.
Great.
Okay. Another example, this one was in Indianapolis, and the narrative that the community wanted to share was that they wanted people to think about a neighborhood that can be developed and grow without displacement, and they wanted people to embrace the future without forgetting their past. So they knew that this neighborhood was going to be changing because of external events that were happening. Things were happening around them, and new development was planned, and it was anticipated that there could possibly be displacement. So a community center engaged with a group of theater artists who sent actors into community spaces, churches, rec centers, other faith-based institutions, coffee shops, and just spent a year talking to the residents about their hopes and fears for the neighborhood. And what they were asking them to do was pre-enact, so like reenact the vision that they had for the neighborhood rather than reenacting something from the past. I was at the event and I saw what they did. They basically took the stories they heard from people, the ideas for the future, and created sets all along a street that they closed for the day. And this set was 3 row houses. And these 3 girls represent an earlier time when these 3 girls lived in one in each of the houses, and they were neighbors. The play showed the 3 girls grown up now as middle-aged women, and they were talking about the changes in the neighborhood, including things that they loved, new businesses and even new development, but also things they were concerned about, like the rising property taxes, and that might actually force them out of the neighborhood. And then one of the women said, well, did you know that there's a legislator who's interested in finding a way to cap property taxes for people who have lived in a neighborhood that's changing for a long time. So protect them because they've been there, and just because things are changing around them, they shouldn't have to leave. And I was thinking to myself, this is fascinating. It's theater, which I love, but it's theater with a policy agenda that's sharing an idea. And then later that day on another set, they were having spoken word and singing, and they actually had the legislator who in fact was pursuing this proposal. And he spoke for a few minutes about how people could get involved in the work around that activity. So if you want to know more about that project, we will share this resource with you, but you can see they had quite a few partners, including the theater companies and set makers and actors. As I said, there are a lot of other benefits from doing these kinds of experiences, community gatherings with a creative approach. People do get to know each other, they share information, and so on. But we're not really focusing on that today, so I'm going to keep going and point out that besides experiences, artists can also help you share information and share your narrative message by creating things that you can hand out or give away or share online. In this case, we asked artists to create a cartoon page, which we handed out to children along with a little crayon set. This was really for children, but targeted to adults that might be in the household, about how to vote during COVID. So the cartoon page was fun and colorful. And on the bottom and on the reverse side, there was information about voting during COVID. Same here. This one is actually Pam Kravitz, who's going to be speaking today. She designed this one. This was same concept, but about the census. And we handed these out with free lunches that were being handed out to kids while schools were still closed. And again, information across the bottom and on the reverse about how to participate and why it was important to participate in the census. And then finally, another cartoon page that was part of a larger project that had a number of different creative approaches, but this one was the cartoon page for staying home, saving lives, again, with information included for the adults in the household. We got a number of questions in your answers to the registration note about funding. So we're going to spend a minute on that. And as Elaine said, thank you all for submitting questions. It was really helpful to us in putting things together. Finding funding for this kind of work, I'm going to give you a pretty simple answer, which is ideally you build the payment for artists and art into your budget, just like you would any other expert consultant who's part of your project. Bringing artists into the project early can be super helpful as well, because they have a lot to offer in thinking about designing events, not just creating some art for an event. And I'll also encourage you to think about non-arts funding. It can feel really natural to say, well, we're having artists, let's go find an arts funder. But really, arts funding tends to be pretty limited, and you're going to find lots bigger pots to delve into if you think about your issue and what you're trying to achieve with your narrative, and think about building, asking those folks for support. In our materials, we actually have 2 videos that go into much more detail about finding funding and about how you can frame your ask when you're asking for creative support, including basically leading with, and you're offering an asset. You are offering something that is different and new and will add value to the work that you're doing. So your funders hopefully will see that if you lead with it that way. Finally, I just want to say that, you can also do projects without funding. And when we talked about the bike ride, I want to just note, you can do a bike ride without paying artists to create those super fun art bikes. They are super fun and they attract a lot of attention. But you can simply ask people to show up. We've done things like a color ride where people came all dressed in one solid color of their choosing. So it was a very colorful, vibrant ride. We did a skirt ride where everyone had to come wearing a skirt. We've done picnic rides. We've done pre-voting rides where we ride bikes to go vote, to bring attention to early voting, for example. And then a couple of other things that we've done. This was a moment in time when we were pressing City Hall to adopt, or actually proceed with, a road diet they had already agreed to do. And it was under reconsideration, because after years of, I'm sure you're all familiar with this kind of thing happening, after years of community meetings and lots of input and many design proposals, City Council had adopted a proposal, and then a soccer stadium was proposed for a new MLS team. And the soccer team was objecting to the road diet. They wanted to keep the road wide for people going to the games. So we just literally contacted people and said, do you want to participate? This was a community council event, but a lot of people from neighborhoods around this community showed up as well. And we brought some wigs, we brought some balloons, people came dressed up and brought some. We did a similar kind of an event when we were trying to save an SRO housing historic building. And this last example, we had a newly elected mayor who had campaigned against a new streetcar and was prepared to stop it even after the rails were in the ground and the streetcars were about to be delivered. Unfortunately, a strong community effort went in to communicate the benefits of the streetcar to city council members, and they overruled the mayor. But as a result, he never wanted to celebrate the streetcar. And we thought it was really important for the community to see that neighbors, that people from all over the city were supportive of it. And so I actually had this idea kind of on a whim and contacted, again, Pam, who's on the call today, and said, what if we just did a little chalk art thing? Now, chalk art on a sidewalk is technically not legal in the city, but we did it very early in the morning, and so a little surreptitiously, and nobody seemed to object. And you can see the streetcar workers in their yellow jackets standing around. They were so excited to see this when they got there. And of course, and then it appeared all over social media afterward. Now, you can see from what I've been sharing with you that documentation is critical and really valuable. And artists, of course, can help with documentation. You can hire a photographer, an illustrator, a videographer, a drone artist. In a couple of cases there, we just had somebody show up who knew what they were doing with an iPhone or a video camera, and just volunteered to create something for us and shared it with us afterward. But paying artists is really important, and I'm just going to stress it now and later, that has to be something that you build into our budget. We wouldn't not pay other consultants. We wouldn't ask our accountant to do it for visibility and exposure. So we shouldn't do that to artists either. And you can see from these images that when you put a creative moment together, it really brings attention in a way that, for example, a meeting, unless it's a super controversial topic, people, and then you're going to get sort of this side said, that side said. In this case, you control the narrative, and it's really fun to look at, fun to see. And so it's pretty easy, honestly, to get a lot of social media action on it, but also to get your local media to pay attention to it. They love coming out, seeing when people are coming together, when they're doing something vibrant, colorful, and fun. Now, the last video I'm going to share with you is from our recent event that we're going to talk more about today, and that is our PaintnSkate event. And this is the first time it's been seen, so you all you're seeing the world premiere of this video. We started with a blank canvas of a roller skating rink, that when we approached the community, that it was a priority for them to have a mural on their rink. And so, as you'll hear, we gathered their input and came up with a design that responded to the way that they think about US at 250. And this is what it looked like after, or as it was being done and after it was done. We also put the image, which we'll talk about in a minute, about what these symbols mean and how they reflect that the people are in charge and the way that the community thinks about that. And we had t-shirts and we had stickers and so forth. I'm going to skip this video because I think we're short on time, but I want to make the point that somebody asked, I think the question was, how do you know you've been successful? Well, we learned in this project, and in many of these projects, that what happens is if it gets shared back, if you're controlling the video and the images and so forth, it's getting shared back through all kinds of social media attention because people like sharing these kinds of things. But we also did a press release for this event. And like I said, the press loves to come out for things like this. We had all 3 local television stations show up for this event and a local weekly magazine. And they picked up the message that this was about the US at 250 and the important value that we share, that in the USA, people are supposed to be in charge. So the message from the narrative is sticky and it gets picked up and used by the media. And that's exactly what you want. And I'm going to stop there and turn this over to our conversation about what this looks like in practice with artists and community leaders.